There are a few of us not able to make it today. Well, happy Wednesday. Thanks everybody for being here this morning / afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from today. So I know it's been a little while since we've had one of our official support specialist professional development sessions, but we thought that this session today was very due and very timely. As most of you know, and I know that a lot of you on this call have been tuning in for our bi-weekly support specialist coffee breaks. And through those sessions, it's been really interesting to hear just like the direction the conversations have been going the last few sessions. And a big part of that has been around like how we can continue to support our students as we transition. A lot of us are transitioning back from this virtual space back to being on campus, and just how we can sort of strategize like what our programs are going to look like going into the next year, but then also reflecting on what we've done for the last year or so. So I know that we have a few newer support specialists on the line, but just so you all are aware, last spring we did do feedback surveys for both student support specialists and for our students across the network. So our friends at SRI are here to sort of, who put together the feedback surveys in the first place, are here to sort of present on the information gathered, but then also really being able to lead a conversation in terms of what that means for the STEM core network, and just sort of how we can use these results to better inform our planning in the future and sort of next steps on our individual campuses. So really excited for today's session, especially as we're sort of gearing up for to launch another round of surveys later this spring. So it's very timely. So I'm going to turn things over to our guests from SRI. We have Chris and Mnet, who have put a lot of work into today's presentation. So hopefully this is a great conversation we're about to have.
I can go ahead and share my screen. Okay, I have to ask, as usual, can everyone see what I'm presenting? PowerPoint? Cool, okay. All right, hi everyone. It is great to be here with you all today. My name is Mnet, and I am here with my colleague, Chris, yeah. We work for SRI Education, and as Cheryl said, SRI serves as the external evaluator for the STEM core program. So we're here today just to talk about some of our evaluation findings from last year. So we're hoping this presentation can kind of serve two purposes. We do want to share the findings from our research, but we also want to hear from you all and get your perspectives on the STEM core program and ways to improve it. So we're just going to be stopping at different points in the presentation just to get your opinions, get your input on the program and some of the questions that emerged from our research. So these are the guiding questions that we're going to be focusing on today, which I believe you all got in advance of our meeting. Okay, so we wanted to start by just going over how we gathered our information in the first place. And as many of you know, and as Cheryl mentioned, last spring, we administered surveys to students and student support specialists. And then we also conducted interviews with administrators and student support specialists. So for our student surveys, we can't calculate a precise response rate just because we're not exactly sure how many students were in the STEM core program in the spring of 2021. But we estimate that our response rate was about 60%. And we do hope to get this higher in future years, including this year. So we're going to be deploying a new round of surveys. We'll deploy our spring student survey soon, and we're just hopeful that you all will be able to help us increase our response rates and student survey completion because we don't have direct access to students. Also, please keep in mind that our results are inflected by program characteristics at for colleges that have pretty large cohorts. And for our student support specialist surveys, we had responses from nearly all our student support specialists, which is great. But you'll see that we only had 13 completed surveys and a number of skipped items. So again, we are going to be deploying our spring surveys soon, and we would greatly appreciate it if you could take the survey when it launches. So for our interviews, we wanted to gather perspectives from different kinds of schools. So from schools that were just joining the STEM core network, schools with current cohorts, and schools that had already left the network or no longer had active cohorts. And we did this so that we could just get a better understanding of leaders' motivations and views at each stage of network participation. So now I will turn it over to Chris, who will talk about the students and student support specialists.
Yeah, thanks, Eminent. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris. I'm going to be talking a little bit about our respondents to these surveys. So a little bit about demographics for the students and student support specialists who responded. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, this is our breakdown of race and ethnicity that was self-reported by students. Our N was 165 respondents, but students could select more than one of these options. So they may not add up to 165. And then this is interesting. We want to show you this in parallel with the student support specialist demographics to kind of highlight this trend that we really noticed as we were going through this data, where student support specialist demographics and student demographics tended to align. And this is really important to us and really interesting because NSF is interested in the diversity of people in other roles, because research is suggesting that students may be more likely to connect with or view a role model as someone they have similar experiences with. And so we think that having this similarity between students and student support specialists is actually going to be a huge asset for STEM Core. The next slide, please. So just a little bit more about student demographics. As you can see here, just over half were eligible for Pell Grants. Almost half were the first in their family to get to college. And just a few other things here. Note that only 19 of the 131 students who answered all of the demographic questions did not identify as being in any groups NSF includes is meant to serve. So specifically what that means is 19 of the 131 students who answered all the demographic questions identified as white and or Asian and as not Pell eligible and not having a disability and not a veteran. So what this tells us is that STEM Core is really recruiting and serving students who fall under these groups that NSF includes is really meant to help. And that's a good thing. That's great. This is interesting that if you remember from the last slide, about 50% of students were first in their family to go to college. And this again is reiterated in our student support specialist demographics, just kind of further driving home the point of there's a lot of similarities between students and the student support specialists, which again is a great thing and something we think of as a plus in the role. However, if you go back real quick, actually, one thing we do want to note is this looks great, but we only had 10 student support specialists respond to this question. So even though the numbers look great, we do want to ideally get those numbers up so that we can accurately reflect across all the schools and see whether or not this is the case that's going on in the program. Okay, and so this was actually an interesting slide. So the program, STEM Core program, is meant to prepare students to succeed in a STEM pathway or STEM career. And so as you can see, in the past year, 84% of our the students responded, were full-time, and 95% of them plan to transfer, which is kind of a big jump from previous years we've seen. And one of the first ideas that popped into our heads was maybe this had something to do with the pandemic. students were more online, there was less going on potentially, that they were staying online in classes and taking these courses. And another really big finding was that about 3/4 of our respondents had already taken Calculus 1, which is kind of a goal for the STEM core program to get students prepared to take Calculus 1. Some of the reasons for that we were thinking is that we might have timed the survey at an interesting time. So maybe students had completed Calculus 1 the previous semester or quarter before they took the survey, which would kind of inflate these numbers. But this is one of the things that we're adjusting in this year's iteration of the survey. We're trying to get an idea of when students start the STEM core program, when they take calculus, so that we can get an idea of whether or not they're completing that course or getting ready for it during STEM core, or if they've already prepared for it prior to joining STEM core.
Okay, so for this next section, we're just gonna focus on the guiding questions of what are the areas of most needed support for your students, and does this differ from what we've seen across the network? So we asked students about their biggest barriers to success, and this is likely inflected by the pandemic and the fact that students were learning remotely online. But the biggest barriers are shown at the top here with blue and yellow segments of each bar. So course difficulty, this was cited as a major or minor barrier by more than 70% of students. And then comes emotional hardship and lack of motivation for the top 3 barriers. But work obligations, financial hardship, and a lack of confidence in STEM abilities were also cited as major or minor barriers by a little less than half of the students. So these 3 are still important student self-reported barriers. We also asked student support specialists about their most urgent, or their perceptions of students' most urgent needs. And students' reports track pretty well with student support specialists' impressions. So it kind of shows that student support specialists, you all are in tune with what your students are going through and what they need. So note that tutoring and academic support was one of the most commonly cited by student support specialists, and that's related not only to the difficulty of courses that students reported, but also students' ability to manage their learning, including their study skills, planning, and knowing when and how to ask for help. And another characteristic of STEM course students, according to some of the people that we interviewed, was that they had a sense of self-doubt or a lack of self-confidence in STEM. So at one school in particular, all the interviewees at the school spoke of students' sense of intimidation and this general inability to see themselves as capable of succeeding in STEM. And this aligns with about 45% of students that reported that they lacked self-confidence in their ability to do STEM as a major or minor barrier to their success. So we actually just want to pause here and get your input on students' barriers to success. And if you feel like some of the findings that we came across last year still apply, and just ask what would you all say are the most needed supports for your students? I can drop the question in the chat. And I'm going to stop sharing for a moment just so that we can see each other as we talk. So the question, just put it in, it's what would you say are the most needed supports for your students?
I would still say like social and emotional supports post, you know, especially like integrating back onto campus full time. I've just had a lot of students like stopping by my office just for like quick chats, whether it's like academic related or just like interpersonal, what's going on in their life. So I think as long as we continue to support them through all aspects, not just academic, barriers that they're going through, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I think we're still at kind of an interesting time where the pandemic is still going on, but things have kind of returned to normal and students are still transitioning and need that emotional and social and emotional support. So yeah, it's an interesting time for sure.
Is there more breakdown on what the social and emotional support needs are? Is it they're not getting it from their parents, they're not getting it from their co-students, they're just overwhelmed, the systems are messed up? I mean, is there more detail on that?
Yeah, for me, it kind of varies. I would say like students that are having like living situation difficulties, whether it be like losing a job or not getting the financial assistance that they might have received prior to campus. Like let's say they're a veteran and their class load kind of dropped. That also affects like how much money they're receiving each semester. And so some of them will have like differing living situations, and that creates kind of a barrier to them succeeding academically as well.
Hey, Cheryl, have you cataloged any of these issues in a list of any sort? Curious.
That's a good point, Greg. Not an exact list, but I think echoing what Maddie is speaking to is something that we hear quite often, but definitely worth putting together for sure.
Yeah, because if there's a list, then maybe we can come up with some specific actions to address it.
Sure. I will say with our survey that we give out, we are kind of limited in finding out, specifics of the issues that students are facing, just because of, the survey is long already and we can only get into so much detail. And we also don't have direct contact with students. But I think that's a great point. Looking into the issues of why students feel this way is a great step.
I know my college daughter had a total meltdown 2 nights ago, crying in my ear. But it was about her roommates, Somebody said, I'm having my boyfriend move in for the summer. Oh no.
Exactly. Yeah, that's stressful for some people.
Yeah, very. Yeah.
Perhaps their whole life. So, things like that can affect them.
Okay.
And I think that's a really good point that you make, Maddie. I've heard from so many of you all on this call and support specialists who are not on the line currently that I think the support specialist role has always sort of been academic but personal, but very much like as we sort of have shifted to this virtual space, for a lot of our students, like the support specialist is one of like the few campus connections that they had, or that person who was checking in with them regularly. So a lot of you had become for your students like all things campus, but then all things like you're my person. So whether if it was personal, whatever's going on academically, a lot of our support specialists were just hearing everything across the board and sort of not necessarily carrying the burden, but becoming that person for our students, which I think is also worth noting.
I want to keep us moving just because we do have several other questions that we're hoping to have a discussion about, but I wanted to acknowledge the comments in the chat, mentorship, community, faculty and staff feeling a little unapproachable, and then also the real structural barriers. I think Cinnamon noted that financial support is huge and food and housing insecurity is an issue, and that's can be a barrier for students to learn, and mental health services. So thank you all for your input on this section. We will keep moving. So I think Chris is going to go over access to internships.
Yeah, so one of the key features of the STEM Core program is connecting students with internships and work opportunities to give them experience in STEM fields. So what we're going to talk about a little bit is just kind of how students felt about those resources and how prepared they felt. So we can actually go on to the next. So we can specifically talk about identifying internships. So the majority of students we talked to who responded to these questions felt well prepared for the internship and application process. Students generally held very positive views of this process. And you can see here we have a couple quotes that kind of demonstrate that. So while student support specialists seemed like bought into the value of internships as a core program focus, instructors and deans, however, were kind of unaware of these students' views on that aspect of the program. And that's something I think we'll talk about a little bit, and maybe a space that could be improved upon going forward in this program. Finding ways to express the students' value that they see in the program to faculty and deans to kind of create buy-in. So here are some things that student support specialists talked about in their open-ended responses in terms of finding and sourcing these internship opportunities for students. So getting them through growth sector, searching online by themselves, talking with other faculty and colleagues. There's just a wide range of ways in which student support specialists can find these opportunities for their students. And I think it varies like highly based on the colleges they're at, depending if they have a large cohort, a small cohort, how well connected everyone is in the college itself. But these are a few of the things we heard from our student support specialist respondents. And then this is just a quote that kind of sums up what kinds of help student support specialists might want regarding sourcing these internships and these opportunities for their students, because it can be a bit difficult. So we heard, especially in this quote, things like professional development around finding these opportunities, maybe ready-made resources like slide decks or packets. We were interested to see if this resonates with you, and if you have any other ideas for how to kind of better feel more prepared to offer these internships or find these internships for your students. I actually do want to open that up a little bit. Do you feel like as student support specialists, you could use a little bit more help in finding these opportunities or internships? And if so, what do you think would be the best way to do that?
I don't mean to talk again, but I think that growth sector has actually done a great job of identifying internships that are open for each region. And with that being said, kind of aligning with what the students' goals are academically and like what internship opportunity fits with them through like an interview process. And I feel like the placement has been pretty cohesive. Of course, we hear about like local internships, but in terms of like getting into like the national labs or like Northrop or NASA, any of like the JPL, anything like that, they've been really helpful. So I will say kudos to growth sector. So thank you, Cheryl and Gabe and Myra.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Does anyone else have any other things to say about things that work well for getting them internships, or maybe ways they might like to be supported in finding them?
Well, one thing I can note, I've heard from a few of you all just as we've been doing like our one-on-one calls. I think even for myself, when I was a support specialist, there were often times like I wasn't a STEM major myself. So I've heard from a few of you just like sort of like the insecurity of understanding like a position description or like the difference between like engineering, tech, or manufacturing, and just like what that looks like for us to understand, and then being able to relate that to our students as well. So I'm just curious in terms of how you all feel like that can be addressed. I think one thing that we've done on Growth Sector's end has been trying to bring employer speakers out a little earlier on so that we can hear, like, it's great for our students to learn and hear, but I think it's also learning for us as student support specialists to be able to hear directly from employers. So we're educating ourselves for our current and future cohorts. I'm wondering if you feel like that sort of helps remedy that sort of insecurity or understanding of what some of our employer partners are looking for, or if there's more that we can be doing to make you feel more comfortable so that you can help your students. I see Cinnamon's kind of noting position descriptions. Yep, agreed. I think that's super helpful, even though considering that we don't always have a direct position description, knowing like where our students will be placed, but probably pushing for that a little bit more to be able to share with you and with our students.
Carol, I'm not knowledgeable about this, but is there a document with each employer that's available to the students to review? Or is it just the webinars?
It's mostly the webinars that we run, and then when they're available, and if there is a position description or a list of employer partners available, we try to share that with our support specialists as much as possible so that they can share it with their students. But again, not always available. For instance, like if we are working with Berkeley Lab, they can't necessarily always give us a position description because there's various mentors who are bringing on students, and we don't know, like a student could be in IT or they could be in a different department. So it's hard to sort of say.
I'm also seeing in the chat, Angelique, specifically having resources or training on how to write and edit STEM resumes, definitely something that would be helpful. And then as Renee, I believe you said, it might be more helpful to talk about just the overall experience of sourcing and finding these opportunities. And I think that's also a fruitful question that we could go into. We have a bit of time. So if anyone wants to share their experience of like maybe how they approach finding these internships, that could be helpful.
I found that our activity director under the grant is very knowledgeable and also quite resourceful. So sometimes when I feel like I don't have quite enough workshops for students or even internship opportunities, Cindy is our activity director and she's just phenomenal. So I don't know, maybe reaching out to your resources is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, that makes sense. Having someone else at the school who's willing to kind of help out with that, I think also creates the buy-in and communication that it does seem like there is maybe not totally there all the time in every cohort. So it could also not only help with this particular task of finding internships, but creating maybe more cohesive program itself. Yeah, that's a good idea. Does anyone else have any thoughts they'd like to share before we move on?
If anyone knows how to use like LinkedIn as like a recruiting tool or Handshake, they list internships that are available for students. And Handshake, they partner with campuses. So I would create an account, or I would suggest creating an account and then just kind of browsing and seeing what's in your area and what you can kind of refer to your students for.
I had one more suggestion too, sorry. I found like the past year or so, our CTE department so the career technical education, there's a lot of overlap that I think we miss. Like they're not, right, they're not STEM students, so they're not going that pathway, but there is a huge overlap. So I've been able to network with the CTE department, and our person in particular has tons of connections that I would have never known on my own. So that could be maybe a suggestion for you.
Great, thank you for those. Really appreciative. I think we are gonna have to head back into the slides. So we have a few more things we want to talk about. And Emnet's gonna actually take over for this section.
Yes. Okay, so the next section and topic that we want to talk about is respondents' views of the student support specialist role. So we'll start with students and their views of the supports provided by student support specialists. Students have a very clear value of the support that you all provide to them. So as with other aspects of the program's value that we'll share about soon, we found that others didn't hear often or clearly enough about students' experiences. And so although academic tutoring and long-term goal setting were the most valued supports, as you can see here, all the supports that are listed were rated as very valuable by the majority of students who responded. And students' views of the workshops are also not surprisingly very positive. And just so you all know, we will share, or maybe Cheryl already has shared, but you will have this PowerPoint to refer to in the future if necessary. I know we're kind of flying through some of the slides, but that's just to make sure that we get through everything. But yeah, students have really positive views of the work that you all are doing in the workshops. And Chris will talk a little bit about the views of college staff.
Right, and so like we said, students have overall great views of the program. It's a little bit different at the college staff level. And it looks like it varies kind of dependent on, it's very dependent on the colleges that the program is at. So as you can see here, we have a range of views. Some saying that the student support specialist fills a gap that was there at these schools and actually helps students and is very, very beneficial. But then we also have some, and these are all insights we gained from these interviews. We have some folks who believe that it might be orthogonal to the goal of fostering students' independence and comfort. So offering this role as kind of like a support or someone for students to lean on. Some size maybe being negative. And like I said, this seemed dependent on the size of the cohorts at some of these schools. So schools with larger cohorts, more integrated cohorts, generally saw the role of a student support specialist as positive. And those with smaller cohorts, maybe only a handful of students, tended to see them maybe more negatively. So one of the things that we kind of thought about is like, why are people responding this way? And they might think that, why are we investing this time and money into these roles and this program if it's only benefiting a few students? And I think one of the things that student support specialists, you might relate to that. One of the things that they can say is like, we have student data showing that this role is important and valuable. And I think it needs to get in the front of the right eyes. So finding ways to show deans, faculty, kind of what the students are saying and what you see when you meet with your students, and showing them, like, sure, maybe you think of it this way, but this is actually how it's impacting students. That might be a way to shift the idea of what a student support specialist is at these schools and give you kind of some power to kind of defend your role and show other people the impact of the program itself. So support for students' overall well-being has been especially critical during the pandemic. And we talked a little bit about this, students coming into offices to talk, and Cheryl saying like, we're not just here for academics, we're here to be a personal support for these students. Like I said, leaders didn't totally seem aware of that dynamic between student support specialists and students. And again, that's just another thing that you can highlight when trying to connect with maybe deans, or if deans or faculty seem unaware of the program, that's kind of a key component of the student support specialist role. It's not just somebody who's there to tell them which courses to take, to look at their transcripts or their grades. It's someone who's there to support them in pretty much everything they need to succeed in this program. So one of the questions we're hoping we could explore as a group is, we know that you support students and that is a huge key portion of your role, but we'd like to know kind of how what does support look like for you as a student support specialist? We know there's professional development. We've sat in on a lot of it. We know you meet amongst each other, but we'd kind of like to know how you feel supported, and maybe if you think there could be other ways in which you could be supported. So I'll open that up to anybody who'd like to speak on it. And actually, I can put that question in the chat.
Are the SSSs on the line being pestered by their universities to because they only deal with a few students, or are you left alone to do your job? Are you supported to do your jobs? I mean, that'd be sort of curious about that. I just submitted a bunch of proposals to the Department of Commerce and Department of Labor for workforce development, and they have a metric about, you know, how much does it cost to bring a student along and into the workforce. So, you know, we're not doing that with this program, but it's always going to be something of importance to the deans, and they want to do effective, cost-effective implementations, right, in the university level that touch as many students as possible. But sometimes you just have to get down and be personal with the students, which is what we do. So but I hope you're not being pestered by your universities.
Yeah, Angelique, that's something we definitely have heard in our interviews, that there's this pressure to kind of grow and especially like with recruiting, making sure you're recruiting students enough. And there are definitely things in place that STEM core, the program, they're trying to improve those things like recruiting, making sure students stay in the program, making sure there's always a steady influx. So that's definitely something that's on leadership's radar, and we spoke to them about those. But yeah, that's a great point. People do feel pressured to keep the program growing.
I'll just echo that as well. I think that's something that from the growth sector end, we heard a lot from support specialists, particularly during the pandemic when it came to recruiting. Like, it was no surprise, like we all saw it, that our cohorts weren't as robust. Like, maybe we didn't have cohorts of 35 students for every one of our programs. And I heard from a lot of support specialists sort of like in panic, especially when it comes to submitting like academic tracking, like, hey, like I don't have as many students, or how am I going to be measured, or does this look badly on me? But I think a conversation we're constantly having is, you know, like, especially when it comes to recruitment, if we are working with campus resources and sort of trying to make sure that like campus recognition and we're getting the word out there, and then it's sort of up to our students to decide if they are going to participate or not. But I think really making sure that we're clear about like the benefits of the program. And then especially when our students are with us, not only retention, but I think I like to look at it more as just support. Like, what are we doing for our students? Like the program, like life happens with our students. We realize that. So being able, and as a support specialist, like you see like your 20, 30 students, and these 5 students had this personal issue and these 2 didn't pass the class. And then what does that mean in terms of retention? So I think we are trying to remove like that stigma around, or like that pressure from the support specialist, so that you all can really focus on the important part, which is like maintaining that communication with your students and making not only a sustainable program, but a program that is really serving students, not so much focused on the numbers.
Kind of going along with what you just shared, Cheryl, I did want to share that like recently I've been working with the outreach office to start like recruiting students for the summer bridge program that we'll be having at East Los Angeles College. And so I've been invited when they have current high school seniors bus on campus and things like that. However, I guess one of the challenges that I have had have been more kind of related to like institutional policies or like things that like are done and things that are not done. Because I had met with my supervisor here to ask if it was possible for me to get the contact information for the counselors at local high schools and things like that, so that I could directly reach out to them and possibly go to the campus and do some presentations. But in order, like I was told that like in order not to create any confusion, it's best to just share recruitment material with the outreach office and that they would pass it along. But I know like from past experience, like when that happens, like they don't push for programs as much as we'd hope for. So yeah, I think that's like one of the common challenges that we're facing. And then also like just from conversations with other people who have programs, like it doesn't make sense to me, but sometimes it seems like the programs are competing because they all have different requirements and they're like, oh no, the student can't do your program because they have to take these classes as part to be part of this program. Like for example, if students want the free tuition with the College Promise program, they have to be enrolled in, I believe, like an English 101 class plus a counseling class, plus something else, and ideally students are cohorted. So sometimes it's challenging to like get students to take those additional STEM courses, and like like when there's just competing cohorts and just there's like different support services, and students are sometimes possibly steered away from some of the other services so that they can be part of other ones. So I think that's like one of the challenges that I've seen.
Great, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. I know people might still have comments, but we are running a bit low on time, so I would like to keep going. But if you have more comments about that question, feel free to drop them in the chat, please.
Okay. So we also found out through our interviews and surveys about participants' views of STEM core overall, not just the student support specialist role. So we'll start with student views again. Students have very positive views of STEM core. I'll just give you a few seconds to read these quotes from students who responded to our surveys. So again, we'll be sharing this slide deck later in case you want to refer to any of our findings in the future. But we just hope that this serves as evidence that your work as student support specialists is noticed and appreciated by students. Students also commented in surveys that the program gave them confidence and a professional network, and they credited their success to the program and its supports. So again, I'll give you a few seconds to just read some of the quotes that we got from student responses. And additional quotes from student surveys echo similar themes, and they show that students feel a sense of community as well as increased confidence and motivation. And the confidence and motivation gains are very important since, as we shared before, overcoming students' beliefs about their prospects in STEM was a challenge noted in interviews. One administrator in particular shared that students need to be convinced that community college does offer a pathway to STEM. And when asked about internship participation, this dean that we spoke to articulated the challenge of getting STEM course students to apply to internships. And I quote, she said, it's hard still to get them over the thinking that they're not ready or that they're not up to the task. They second guess themselves, they undervalue themselves, end quote. And while ongoing work to foster students' sense of confidence and STEM identity will be important and can help with this, I think it's important to note that the program already does this well for some students, and they reported this themselves. So I think that's a very positive thing. And now we will turn again to college staff views of the STEM core program.
Should we go to the next slide, please? So this is really similar to the student support specialist role perceptions, right? Generally, few instructors or deans that we spoke to in our interviews had a really clear understanding of what STEM core is and how it's beneficial. Only 2 people that we talked to about STEM core said that it helps students to access higher paying jobs in ways that improve their individual lives and communities. A lot of the people we talked to talked about specific parts of the program, such as internships or the accelerated math pathways, that kind of thing. But very few kind of could talk about STEM core as a whole. And again, this just goes to reiterate this lack of understanding at the administration and the faculty level of what the STEM core program itself is about. So as you can see here, we have we have a quote and then just a little bit of data kind of backing all that up. So actually, I think we'll move on to the next one and I can ask a question there. So if you go to the next slide, please. And so we actually also received this quote from a student support specialist from their survey, saying that they're not even sure if the program's a good fit, even though they are a part of this program. And I think that speaks to the varied differences from school to school, right? Some schools, like we said, have different programs that they teach, different classes they offer, and it can make it hard to kind of put the STEM core program into action. So like being able to customize the program to fit in every college's needs is a bit of a challenge for some folks. And that's something we noticed. One thing though, that leadership and also us at SRI are really interested is how can that be bridged? How can we fix that? How can there be more cohesiveness in the program to better serve any community college that wants to implement the program? And I actually would like to open that up to everyone. I know we have a little bit of time, maybe 2 or 3 minutes we could talk about this. I know we've talked a little bit about folks communicating more with other people at their colleges, which in and of itself can be a bit of a challenge. But if there are any other ways that you all think cohesiveness could be improved, or if there are ways that you think your school does it really well, you'd like to share those.
Yeah, or even that question, and if anyone has been particularly successful in conveying the importance of STEM core to their school's admin or have particularly good relationship with deans, just thinking more about sustainability and how to really sell the STEM core program.
Say just a brief bit here. My name is Barbara Rollison. I'm from the Community College of Aurora. And I've been doing this STEM core position for just over a year and a half, so 3 semesters. And I've learned a lot. We actually have another STEM program on campus called the STEM program, also a grant from the National Science Foundation. And actually I've been doing a lot of thinking lately about really this whole idea. I have a whole pitch in my head. I need to put it on paper. And really, I'll be probably reaching out to Cheryl soon to kind of talk through this with you before I go to our dean. We have a new STEM building coming, brand new, big STEM building coming in a year. And I just don't think we're doing it right. I just think the whole You know, students in my program get internships. Students in the STEM program, they get mentoring. My students don't get mentoring. So I just feel like there's a really a great, I've been thinking about it. I have some ideas. I want to give a pitch about how we can better, for every STEM student on our campus, really allow them to customize the kind of support and services that they want. And we have a lot of students that are college. I don't think they're even getting the emails, you know, about college visits. And so we're not even connecting with all the STEM majors at our college. So I think so I'll be willing to share my pitch. I just need to make sure that it's appropriate. So I'll be reaching out to Cheryl and just kind of making sure that I'm within my bounds before I go, and just kind of have someone else to listen to me with my ideas. But yeah, I feel like the program's great. I have great support at the college. My department chair loves it. My dean loves it. So I support a little bit less than 30 students. It's been the students have been wonderful. I love the job. I think we can do it better, the whole process, the way we do it. So I'm working on it. Not much detail there, sorry, just kind of throwing that out there.
That's great, yeah, thank you. And it's great to hear that you do have such great support. That's something, you know, like we said, these surveys all the data is from those who respond. So if this might not be, you know, the most accurate data we could possibly get, which is why we're sharing this with you, and we want to keep doing this so that we keep this buy-in of people filling out these surveys so we can get an accurate representation. But it's great to hear that you do have such good support at your school. And then I see in the chat, there's a little bit about having get to know you meetings. That's a great way to build relationships with faculty and staff, right? Emailing folks, yeah, definitely.
And I just want to chime in too really quick. The STEM core program over here at SAC, it has been around for a good minute. And I think that the layout of the program, what we do for students, everything just down to the foundation, I think has been a really great example of how to run a STEM program. And it really, I mean, I have major support from my dean, and we've now expanded it to basically using this program model for a new program that's going to be encompassing computer science and computer information systems. We just hired a new support specialist, and I'm teaming up with them. And even though that's also within the realm of STEM, they opened a new like computer information's wing at our school. And again, they're just using the STEM core model. And it's just really helpful that we're able to share a lot of the same foundational, foundation of how the program's set up. So that way there is a cohesiveness between the different programs and the different even departments and whatnot. So I think that, again, STEM Course provided just a really good layout of how a program can be run, and, you know, presenting that even to your dean or to your higher ups and saying like, these are models that can be, it's a model that can be replicated with others. So that way there is kind of like, just a role model for other programs that can get going. So yeah, it's just been awesome over here.
Myra, thanks for sharing that. You just reminded me also, that's such a great example. And I see that Cinnamon had noted that her dean's a huge supporter and looking to take her to meet with the provost. That's awesome. And I think that's like the goal that we all want to see, but how do we get to that point? And what do we do in situations where we don't have like that dean who's like championing for the program? And I just want to highlight like one strategy that I know like I had used in the past as a support specialist, and I've seen like a few others do, is like bragging on your program. So putting together like those great newsletters I see so many of you put together, or those STEM core videos that sort of like highlight or take on student feedback, and like sharing that with your dean, sharing that with your campus, because it circulates. And I remember years ago, we did that at SAC, ended up in like the president had seen it, and they started talking about in meetings how like the STEM core program and it's called B2E at Santa Ana College, but how B2E would be the model for the guided pathways model, like across the campus, like not just within STEM. So I say all that to say, like, you just never know like who's going to, who knows what you're doing on campus. And even though like I know that several of our support specialists are part-time or have like 10 hours a week, so maybe that's not the most feasible, but finding ways to be able to sort of highlight the great work that you're doing, even if it's student testimonials or taking like 30-second videos of your students who can share like what their experience has been like in the program. Like, it's great for SRI to be able to share these quotes with us and being able to share the statistics, but also being able to talk to your students directly and sort of highlight like what you're doing, and being able to share that on campus is, I think, speaks volumes.
To that point, Cheryl, I spoke with a student support specialist last year who talked about the fact that their role is going to be institutionalized, and the college is fully willing to take that on. And one of the things that they cited as a benefit was that it brings good press when STEM core students do well. It's good for the college. So that's a good point to just advertise the good things that come out of STEM core.
I just throw out one more thing. Concerning that press, we're gonna, anybody that has anything great happening here at we have many students, I'd say 7 to 10 that have really exciting things happening for them, internships or trying to think besides internships. Well, not just through STEM core, but other internships in the community. We're gonna do, I wanna have like footlong in photos with the president, where we just, I want all of them to come. We have a new president at our college. I want him to hear their story, what's happening with them, get a chance to meet the president, and have just to really celebrate together all these awesome things that are happening for them.
I think we're at time, so we just wanted to thank you all for letting us come and speak to you about our evaluation findings, and more importantly for all the work that you do for your students. We had one question that maybe you all can consider in the, as you go on, but it's just, what is your vision for STEM core at your campus in the next 6 to 12 months? So we wish you the best of luck, and really appreciate your time.
Yeah, like we said, please use this information that we gathered and put in the slide deck, however you best see fit. And we will also be sending the links to the newest iterations of the survey within the next couple of weeks. So we ask that if you have time, please fill those out. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I'll be sending out the recording and PowerPoint and slide deck after this. Thanks for joining.
Great.
Thank
have
you.
a great day.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.